Hello everyone, it is Jazz here. Today I'm doing my September reading wrap-up. Yay! Let's go on! So by some weird miracle of miracles, I did end up not only reading 6 books over the course of the month of September, but I also ended up completing my Goodreads goal challenge for the year. And the reason why this is amazing is because I was struck so hard with slow reader syndrome in the month of September. Like, it was bad because my brain was just tired for like a wide variety of reasons, and I was like, I just cannot get the eyeballs to read. So thus we have a lot of short book and audiobook reviews today. The first book that I finished in September was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is a story about a young boy who ends up being named Nobody. In the beginning of the story, his parents and his sister are killed by a mysterious man. He kind of ends up accidentally escaping from this man into a graveyard, and he ends up being raised by the ghosts in the graveyard. So I've been meaning to read The Graveyard Book for the longest time, probably since the book came out, which was forever ago, and I'm so happy that I finally got around to it because I did really love listening to this book in audiobook. There are 2 audiobooks of The Graveyard Book. One is read by Neil Gaiman. The other one is read by a group of actors, and it's a dramatized version. I chose the Neil Gaiman read one because sometimes you just want Neil Gaiman to read his books to you because his audiobooks and the way he reads his books are just awesome. Because I really enjoyed this book so much, I probably will eventually check out the dramatized version of this as well and probably read it in print. It's one that I will definitely reread. Now, one thing I think about the book itself that is really fun is that it is kind of an anecdotal story from the beginning, and basically what I mean by that is while the story is connected to Nobody, it does have like specific stories that are just almost like short stories at points about different ages within his life, so basically about him as he grows up. Of course, the plot does, propel towards the middle/end into more of a traditional story, but it is kind of anecdotal at the beginning, and there's 2 things that I really like about it being set up like that. One is that because Nobody is growing up in a graveyard, he does kind of get certain powers, I guess, if you will. And I really like how each of those stories shows the development of how his powers work, so that when you get to the end, you're like, oh, interesting. That was totally worth figuring out all that stuff. Another cool thing about it being kind of anecdotal is that it is a layout that is often used in classic children's books. So it's kind of like a classic literature feel in terms of the story arc, but it still had the Neil Gaiman twist of it being set in a graveyard with ghosts. Another kind of nice thing about The Graveyard Book is that while it does have some creepy elements because of the ghosts and things, it's not too horribly creepy because it is a sort of middle grade book, so I think any age can enjoy the book. I just genuinely love the story, and I will definitely, like I said, be up for rereading this at any time, and I decided to just give it 5 stars for being super awesome. Apparently I was already getting in that Halloween vibe all the way in September because not only did I read a book about a boy growing up with ghosts, I also ended up reading Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a graphic novel. It is basically a collection of 7 short, creepy stories. So I've heard a lot about Through the Woods on BookTube for a while, and I thought I definitely should try that because I do love a graphic novel and I do love some creepy stories. And luckily, I was not at all disappointed in this book. First of all, the art is just fabulous. It's definitely a really cool style. I also kind of like what she does with some of the lettering and different things like that, and just how she uses the lettering and the art to really express like the mood of the stories. I will warn you that many of these stories do have what I like to call ambiguous endings, and by that I mean that there isn't really like full-on closure to some of these stories. Now, I personally like that if it's done right, because I think that it kind of leads you to imagine what could happen on your own. I feel like Emily Carroll does them in a really good way, so that really helps. I think there is a bad way to do ambiguous endings, but this one actually does them in a really good way, and I kind of like being left in the dark, if you will, on some of the endings, because what I make up is definitely creepier sometimes, and it just kind of inspires you to use your imagination. If you're someone that likes really cool art as well as creepy stories like me, I think you will also enjoy Through the Woods, and I decided to give Through the Woods 5 stars. The next book that I completed in September was technically 4 books, because it was the 4 Frog and Toad books by Arnold Lobel, but because I listened to this in an audiobook that had all 4 books in it, I'm just gonna kind of make it count as one book. Basically, the Frog and Toad stories are children's picture books that are about a frog and a toad and how they're best friends and their little best friend adventures. I will probably read Frog and Toad books until my dying day, because I love Frog and Toad stories that much, and I don't even care that I'm a grown-up, because Frog and Toad is for everyone. I specifically really love Frog and Toad's friendship. I really love that even though they are very different personalities, they find a way to be friends and do great things together and for each other. It's like friendship goals right there. And also, I do really enjoy the comedic situations that the characters end up in. It always gives me a giggle and makes me laugh. The audiobook version of this is really super excellent. It is read by the author, which is always a audiobook plus. Am I right? And also, it has really fun background music and sound effects to it. So I think even if you're an adult, you could really enjoy this, but I could really see kids getting a great time out of listening to an audiobook of this. And after listening to it in audiobook, I had to go get a new hardcover copy that bound up all the books together, because I actually didn't own all 4 of the Frog and Toad books. It's got these really cool edgings as well as the awesome pictures in it. And I will link you to this on Amazon, because if you also love Frog and Toad, you need to get this bind up as well. So obviously, this was a 5-star book yet again, because you know I'm obsessed with Frog and Toad. The next 3 books that I read in the month of September were books 6 through 8 of the Anne of Green Gables series. And I'm just going to take a little wacky dance break here, because I, after 20 years, finally got to books 7 and 8 of the Anne of Green Gables series. I feel like I should preface my thoughts on this by saying that if you've never read this series before, you probably want to think of these last 3 books here as a spin-off series more than just part of the Anne of Green Gables series as a whole. They do focus more on her children, but I think if you think of them as a spin-off series going into them, as I did, you'll still find something that you really like about them. So let's start off with my book thoughts on Anne of Ingleside, which is the 6th book. This one does focus quite a bit on Anne's children and the little wacky things that they get into. It does have some of Anne and Gilbert in it, though, because there are some funny little stories with Anne and Gilbert, but it is mostly, I want to say 90% about her kids. Book 6 was a reread for me, and I was kind of leery going into it, because when I read this as a kid, I did not love this book, because I felt like Anne's children were just so childish. And I was not a kid that behaved like a kid. I was a kid that was acting like an adult even though I was a child. And I was like, Mom, why are Anne's kids so stupid? And my mom went, they're just acting like kids normally act, like they're doing stuff that I did when I was a kid. It's just not something that you do. I was like, oh, okay. However, I think this book grew on me upon my reread of this book because I am now an adult and I can now appreciate childhood, as well as the fact that I spent many years as a dance teacher working with kids and getting how kids think. And I think Ellen Montgomery did a really good job of really expressing how kids at certain ages think. I also found it really fun to really see Anne and some of the adult characters through the children's eyes, because it really gave a new aspect to those characters. And I also found it kind of fun to see how similar and or different the children were to their parents. And I did give this a 4.5 rating, and the reason it didn't get that full 5-star love thing is because chapter 32 was super tedious to read. I don't even think this book needed that chapter. I didn't want to dock a full star for like one kind of bleh chapter, so that's why I went with 4.5 stars, but I still found it a really fun and amusing read. On to my thoughts on book 7, Rainbow Valley. Book 7 is a little bit about Anne's children, but mostly focuses on the Meredith children. And the Meredith children are the children of a minister that lives quite close by to Anne's family. And basically it's a kind of about them growing up and dealing with one of the issues that they have, which is that their father is unmarried and doesn't really pay that much attention to them. And there is also kind of an adopted child involved in this named Mary, and she's kind of a crazy character, and it's a little bit about her as well. Rainbow Valley is definitely one that you're going to want to kind of consider as a spin-off novel for sure, because it doesn't feature Anne very much, or her children even very much. It is truly focused on those Meredith children quite a bit. Now, that does not make this book a bad book. I still think it's a really well put together book. I still really like the stories in it, what she was doing with the tone of this book, because I do have to say that there is sort of a darker undercurrent in this one. I do think there's like a darker undercurrent if you really think about it in all the Anne of Green Gables books, but this one you kind of notice it a little bit more because of the stuff that's going on with these particular kids, and like if you really think about it hard, it is there, but there is still quite a bit of positivity. I listened to this on a LibriVox audiobook that was dramatized, and if you don't know what LibriVox is, they basically use volunteers to read books in the public domain, and thus the audiobooks are free. They do sell some audiobooks, but you can just get the free ones and stream them that way, and you can get LibriVox books on both the LibriVox app as well as find them on Scribd. So if you want a dramatized version of this to listen to, you can actually do that, and it's not too bad considering that everybody pretty much records the stuff themselves and it's by volunteers, and the readers were pretty good for this. So for free, I thought it was a pretty interesting, good audiobook to listen to. I still only gave this 4.5 stars. It didn't quite reach the 5-star love it zone, because I do kind of wish that Anne's kids were featured more in this book, and I feel like it could have been done. Even though it wasn't like a super favorite, I do think it's still an enjoyable read. And lastly, we have book 8, Rilla of Ingleside. In this story, Rilla, who is Anne's youngest daughter and is like a 15-year-old girl, becomes the main character. Of course, all her older siblings are pretty much close to adulthood or are adults in this story, and it is about how Anne and her family, as well as Rilla in particular, deal with World War I and the things that are going on with World War I. So Anne's sons end up going off to war, and Rilla has like some at home from war experiences and things like that. Now, this book is freaking brilliant, and it like makes me so like mad at myself for it like taking me almost probably like 20 years to read it. Like, I'm so like perturbed with myself that I just did not ever get around to reading this until now because this book is so flipping good. It's got like that like almost war drama thing. It still has some like funny moments that are usually an element of the Anne of Green Gables story. I really like Rilla and seeing Rilla grow as like a person because of the war going on. This book also features probably more Anne than you see in books 6 and 7. So you're getting to see Anne and Gilbert a little bit more in this and get to see their reaction. And also this like book will make you feel the feels. Like I was like, I feel the feels. And I'm also scared for people because people have gone off to war and I'm scared and I'm just feeling all the feels. I did listen to quite a bit of this in audiobook as well. I believe I listened to the audiobook read by Emily Durante, and it was pretty well read, and she has like a nice pace of reading. So I do recommend checking out that audiobook if you're looking for this in audiobook. When I'm not going through a slow reader syndrome phase, I will definitely reread this one just in print, and I'm so glad that I finally got around to reading it. Can you just tell this is going to be a 5-star? For an overall rating of the Anne of Green Gables series, I have to say that I did give every book 5 stars except for book 6 and 7, which were 4.5 stars. So I guess that maybe is like a 4.75 rating. Tempted to just like round it up to 5 because I do think every single book in the Anne of Green Gables series is genuinely good. And you kind of need book 6 and 7 to really have like the full impact of Rilla of Ingleside. I think you would still understand this if you hadn't read these 2 books, but I think these 2 books do make this one like extra better. So I still think every story is worth reading and is really excellent in terms of the way the whole story is planned out and all those things. Books 1, 5, and 8 are like my super like I want more than 5 stars faves. So basically the series is flippin' awesome. Highly recommend you reading all 8 of those books. That was my September reading wrap up. I'm not going to do a TBR for the month of October because there are some readathons that I'm thinking about joining, and I want to make individual TBR videos for those. And also because I'm doing readathons, I'm not quite sure what other books than the books I plan to read for those I'm going to get to. Otherwise, thank you for watching, fabulous people. I will see you later. Bye!